So on average, I get promoted every year in 3 to 4 months or so. And obviously, I haven't been at the same company for my entire career as a professional adult, which is around 10 years, almost 10 years now. But I consider promotion some kind of move where I've ended up making more money, more responsibility, a different role, or overall some kind of step forward in my career. So yeah, I average around every year, 3 months, 4 months. Most recently, I was promoted to senior level at Microsoft. This was last month, I believe. And throughout this time, throughout all these moves, throughout all these roles and companies, I've worked at big tech now, currently. I've worked at startups, 20 people. I've worked at SMBs. I've worked at nonprofit companies. Yeah, so I've kind of seen a whole range of different types of organizations and teams. And I've learned a couple of things about getting promoted that I want to share with you all today. So with all that being said, hi, I'm GPS. I do cloud things at Microsoft here on YouTube, and welcome to a new video. So in terms of getting a promotion, I think the biggest thing that has really helped me is to just fully understand that my career is in my control. That doesn't mean that I am going to be able to do everything that I want, and every single move and decision that I want to make is the one that I wanted right off the bat. But ultimately, I do end up being in situations where I can make the decision. You have to be very real with yourself in terms of that. The earlier you are in your career, the more limited those moves and decisions you can make are. And as you gain experience, as you gain a little bit more leverage, then obviously things start to change. As an example, if at your first job, you're really unhappy and you're new, it's your first job, you don't have that much experience, you're really unhappy, it may come down to the fact that your only decision is, I just have to go find some other place to work at. And that was what happened at my first job. I felt like I was hitting every metric. If you asked my colleagues and even my manager, they were saying the same things. But ultimately, the people who decided who gets promoted weren't seeing it that way either. And I tried a couple of things, ultimately didn't work out. And the decision was mine to, okay, this just might not be the place where I can continue to grow. What's the next move? So I left. That was the only decision that I had in that situation. After that, I kind of encountered something very similar. After that was the help desk gig. And it was just a role in a place where there really just wasn't much growth. I got as much as possible as I could have gotten out of it, for sure. But there wasn't much more growth there. And I knew my decision was, I knew I didn't want to spend more than 2 years in help desk. As soon as I landed that role, I was really, really aware of that. So then I ultimately had to leave again. That was my decision. And I think what I'm trying to say here is ultimately you really need to take your career by its reins. Don't let other people make moves for you, because ultimately it is going to be you who has to clock in, do the job, and, clock out, of course, right? As I continued growing after this time, I then landed the sysadmin gig. And I saw a little bit more that I had leverage because I was developing a skill set that only I had at that company. So when I wanted to push for a little bit more growth, I had more leverage. And I was able to turn that into a promotion. But that was only because I had developed a skill set that they needed. And this is where that leverage comes into play, and where I'm telling you, you have to be very strategic with what you have. You can't be you could be. But if you go up to someone and say, hey, I want a promotion, but you don't have the skills, you don't have the value, you bring nothing to the table, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, right? But the sooner you build that, the sooner you can go up to the table and be like, hey, This is what I deserve. This is why. And if you're being real with yourself and you have a supportive management system around you, then most likely you're going to end up with that for sure. After that, my leverage has continued and continued and continued. And then there are other details specifically with this last promotion that leverage has been like a massive thing for it that I can't go into. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is take full control of your career and sort of play with the cards that you have. It's not always going to be the same hand dealt. So really consider everything that's going on and figure out what's the best move for you. Another thing that I highly recommend, highly recommend, is keep a career journal. I have been journaling my life in general for the last, 7 years, I think. These are all my journals from the last 7 years. And I was just looking at the ones from like 2016, 2017. And I have entries there of me learning like 1 week iOS development, the next week DevOps, the next week cloud, the next week Android development. Like I was all over the place. And it wasn't until I sat down and selected a niche, and you can see like my entries start to feel a little bit more like grounded and solid. Be active with how you feel in your career and write it down somehow. I journal every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, because when I wake up, I feel like my brain is so foggy. And as soon as I get all those thoughts out, I can just get started with my day with a clear mind. But you don't have to. I have a video about like a weekly routine that you could spend 15 minutes a week just reflecting on your career. And that way you also don't end up in a role for like 5-10 years and that you didn't want to end up in, right? So keep a career journal and reflect on the good and the bad and the stuff that you do well and the stuff that you need to work on. I think that's important as well. Another big thing on promotion is definitely keeping documentation of your merits, because no one is going to do that for you. Some places might have systems in place for that, but you should have somewhere where you save, like at the end of some kind of project, save the results that you have, save the feedback that you have. Maybe it's a Word doc or something like that. Because when you have to go and kind of, put yourself up, say like, hey, I deserve a promotion, you're going to need all this information for that. So highly recommend it. If that's the journal, awesome. If that's some other kind of system, awesome. Some places do have formal systems. Like at Microsoft, we have something called the Connect that happens twice a year. And it's a place for you to put all these things. But it's a lot easier because I keep documentation on the stuff that I've accomplished for me to just go through every entry from the last 6 months and then write it into this system that we have in place, instead of that moment just sitting down and trying to remember everything I did for the last 6 months. Another thing that has been crucial to getting promotions is really taking responsibility and control of any manager syncs that you have. If you get to have like a weekly sync, a bi-weekly sync, once a month, whatever it is, make sure that you are going into that meeting with everything laid out that you need to talk about, you need to bring up, you're blocked on something, whatever it is. That is your time. Don't let it be the responsibility of a manager of what gets spoken at that meeting. That is for you. That is for you to make sure your manager is aware of what you're doing. Make sure your manager gets the help that you need, or whatever it is that you need to bring up. Sometimes my one-on-ones is just like, hey, I'm just working on this, nothing too crazy. Sometimes it's like packed with questions. Sometimes there's a little bit more space for like casual conversation, but ultimately I know that I get out of it what I need to get out of it. And I highly recommend you do that as well. And the last bit of information I have is find mentors in your career, but don't do it in a cringy way. Mentors, I feel like, are people who come into your life or as a professional in a very organic way. I have a couple that come to mind, and they've just been people that we were on a meeting or somehow we met just somehow. And there was a little bit of a chemistry there. And it was someone that I wanted to continue keeping up with, someone who I wanted to ask questions, and I would. And eventually that turns into something where like at any time, that I need like just some advice, that's a person that I go to. But if you're someone like, I get this all the time. People are like, will you mentor me? Like that has no value. Like me mentoring you without knowing you, without being part of your professional career or anything like that, brings no value to you. I don't think any stranger can bring valuable mentorship to you. But someone who's like more a senior teammate, and in my case, I have someone who is more senior teammate that has been part of my career since I started at Microsoft. And this is a person I definitely look up to whenever I need advice, whenever I feel like, because I can get a little, I wouldn't say impulsive, but I can get a little like emotional. And sometimes I'm like, oh man, I can't believe this. And this is a person that I go to who definitely talks some sense into me. And it's just been something that we've built over a couple of years. But no stranger can offer you that, right? Mentorship, you have to think about like, this person needs to care about your development, and you also need to care about that relationship that you have with that person. And I just don't think like that is something that a stranger or some kind of like service that you have to pay for can offer. But anyway, I think those are the thoughts that come to mind when it comes to promotion. I guess another thing to kind of keep in mind is sometimes you just can't get promoted where you're at. And that's just, it is what it is. Maybe you'll have to leave and then come back. Sometimes you might feel like you really deserve it and you're just not going to get it. I've had that happen to me too. Sometimes it takes a lot of fighting to get it. And that's just the reality. Sometimes it comes without even asked. Like my first promotion at Microsoft was a complete surprise to me. The second one, I felt there was a little bit more of like a back and forth. So I guess there's no one secret. I think that's a good thing though. It keeps things interesting. All right. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.